city, state and national governments in India. Ms. Matthews has worked largely in India with further on-ground project experience in countries such as Sri Lanka, Pakistan, France and Libya. The panel will be moderated by Dr. O.P. Agarwal, the CEO of WRI India, where he leads a team of over 200 researchers. He is a highly respected thinker and practitioner with a wealth of experience in public policy issues related to urban development, poverty alleviation, capacity building, governance, and environment. Dr. Agarwal was a member of the Indian Administrative Service from 1979 to 2007, where he held several positions. In this time, he was also the Joint Secretary in the Department of Personnel and Training and the Joint Secretary in the Ministry of Urban Development. He was Secretary of Transport in the state of Assam as well. He was principal author of India's National Urban Transport Policy, which was adopted in 2006. He was the World Bank's Global Urban Transport Advisor in Washington, D.C. for over 6 years and chaired the U.S. Transport Research Board Committee on Transportation in Developing Countries for 6 years. Over to you, sir.
Thank you very much, and welcome again to everyone for the panel. Particularly thanks to members of the panel to have very kindly agreed to join this discussion. But before we start the discussion, what I would like to do is start with a small video message that has come from our chairman, Mr. Jamshed Godrej. Mr. Godrej is not only a renowned and well-known corporate leader in the country, he also is a very important philanthropist, particularly in the environment space. He chairs the board of WRI India, of the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, the World Wildlife Foundation, of the Council for Energy, Environment and Water, and a number of others. His sort of contributions to sustainability have been immense and over 30 years so far. The small message that he has sent is something that was a really delightful message. I would request that that message could be played before we start the discussion.
Last November, at COP26 meeting in Glasgow, India committed to achieving bold targets by 2030 and also attaining net zero by 2070. What is now needed is action on the ground. Cities are where nearly 70% of the growth in emissions will take place, and so action must now move from the global negotiating table to our cities. Unfortunately, at the ground level, an understanding of climate issues and the actions needed to achieve our goals is weak. This calls for a mammoth effort at building capacity at the ground level. Building capacity at scale, especially for mid-career practitioners, is not an easy task. It needs a teaching style that facilitates learning by doing. It needs a recognition of the fact that the people involved already have a heavy workload and cannot be away from their workplaces for long. Therefore, there is a pedagogical and logistical challenge. In this case, yet another challenge will be in converting the complex climate terminology into one that can be understood at all levels. Given these challenges, I am really happy that the Minister, Mr. Hardeep Singh Puri, has agreed to launch the Leaders in Climate Change Management Program. It is befitting that he is launching this, as it demonstrates his interest in moving India's commitments forward in his jurisdiction. This will be an important message to all other sectors and to all other countries. I must congratulate all our partners, WRI India, the Shakti Sustainable Energy Foundation, the National Institute of Urban Affairs, UNEP, and the Indian School of Business, who have come together to design and develop this program. I'm very happy that the Administrative Training Institute in Mysore has taken the lead in being a delivery partner. With this, I once again congratulate all our partners, and I thank Minister Hardeep Singh Puri for taking the lead in furthering this capacity building effort. Clearly, the message to the rest of the world, as demonstrated by him, is that India is serious about its commitments and fully intends to reach its goals. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Godrej. That's very powerful words coming from you. Now with that, moving to this discussion, we've been talking about building capacity for climate change management. What I want to do is take advantage of a panel like this to broad-base that discussion. Go beyond climate change alone, but take it into what are the kinds of capacities that we need to build up in our urban sector. How can we do that? What are the methods that can be adopted? Really broad-base the discussion of capacity building, going beyond climate. Of course, climate is going to be important, but go beyond that. The reason I say this is our urban population is really projected to double in the next 30 years, going from about 400 million today to over 800 million in the next 30 years. Is achieving what we did from the beginning of civilization till now is going to be achieved in the next single generation. That's the kind of tsunami, as I call it, which is really taking place in our cities. And cities are going to be important for many other reasons. One, we've articulated an ambition to become a $10 trillion economy. I think good ambition that we need to articulate, need to work towards. But going from 2.75 billion that is there today to 10 billion is a near quadrupling in the next 8 to 10 years. Cities will be the place that has to accommodate this growth, in fact, even enable this growth. So that's where cities play an important role. Second, as the Honorable Minister said this morning, climate commitments, a lot of the action will have to be in the cities. A lot of the future growth and emissions will happen in cities as our economic growth takes place. So cities again will be the stage where a lot of those climate commitments will have to be met. Finally, the last thing that I keep talking about when we talk of cities, COVID has shown us that the agglomeration economies that we talk about as important for urban areas has actually proved that in certain cases it can be a disadvantage. So how do we deal with agglomeration economies and yet try to make sure that our cities don't become places where these kind of pandemics spread rapidly? So these are many challenges that cities face. The big rapid growth is of course one of the most important. What do we do about them? So with this, what I would hope is that some of the recommendations coming out of this group would be able to feed into the work that an expert committee set up by the ministry, is a committee of experts to develop capacity building programs, recommend capacity building for planners in the country. The fact that this committee was set up on the basis of the finance minister's budget speech or something included in that really shows that the government itself is recognizing the need for building capacity in urban areas. I think that's why it found place in the finance minister's budget speech itself. And as a follow-up to that, the committee has been set up, and I'm hoping that thinking coming out of this group would help feed into that committee. So with that, let me start with Mr. Sanjeev Chadha. Mr. Chadha is part of the Mahatma Gandhi State Institute of Public Administration, MG-SIPA as it is known. The question to you is, heading a training institute at a state level, to what extent are you seeing capacity gaps in the state? What kind of programs are you thinking of running? I mean, what is the way forward that you are thinking of at the state level?
Yeah. Thank you, sir, and good afternoon to all of you. So there are considerable gaps in terms of capacity which needs to be built up. Firstly, if we talk about the personnel who are coming to the other local bodies as well as those belonging to the town and country planning, the kind of curriculum that they have, it is derived from what is actually happening in the ground. And last 7-8 years, what has happened is kind of it has catapulted us at the world level in terms of whether it was Swachh Bharat Mission or Amrut or smart cities. So these things has been they're not part of the natural curriculum. And in terms of we also undertake training programs for the PCS officers and IAS officers. Basically, now in terms of development, they are the ones who have to take it forward from the professional cadre But at the end of the day, it is seen that even they do not know much about these aspects. And of course, they get transferred from one department to the other. But this is such a very important department that, having knowledge about these aspects will be such relevant. Then there's gaps between the master plan and the various projects that are launched in terms of the Government of India projects and the state government projects also. Many a times they are not coherent with each other. So therefore, there are problems there itself. And we have two cadres. Like I said, one is urban local bodies. It's a different cadre. Then the town and country planning is a different cadre altogether. And they both live in their own silos. There's not much of coherence between them as such. And then overall, if you go by, I think generally we have 164 urban local bodies in the state of Punjab. And generally, if you go by, and of course, this is everywhere in other parts of the country also. The quality of the manpower is not so good, even the quantity is not so good, and the technology-wise also they do not have much, hands-on approach to this extent. And further, one more thing, because we were partners to Amrut also, where we did a lot of programs for Amrut. Now we are partners in NJM also. So this is based upon how we interacted. There's a lot of gap between how the elected representatives go by and how the official term goes by. And in official also there are two aspects. One is the which I said the ISPCS, which they keep on being transferred from one place to other, but they had. And many times the professional cadre is not being able to take up this. So there's a lot of in terms of capacity. It derives a lot.
You see, I can't resist the temptation because I see Manjula here, who's heading the API in Mysore. Can I pose the same question to you? How do you see this in Mysore?
Sir, capacities at various levels. While we are talking about urban planners, etc., one of the things that we notice is, because when we are talking about climate change, we are also talking about infrastructure, how resilient that infrastructure has to be, and the services, because urban areas, when there is any, let's say, a disaster, etc., how do you ensure this infrastructure is able to keep up and services are delivered despite the disaster to people? It's an important aspect. So one of the things we notice is that most of the training is always focused at the higher level, and the cutting edge people don't get exposure to proper training. So we are actually not really reaching the message across to them, and therefore it is important that any training program first looks at JEs and ZS inspectors and those who are not really taken into consideration and ignored. See, so I just focus on the JEs per se. We realized many of them don't even know how to, they're all civil engineers. Now we are talking about transport and how it contributes to emissions and so on. But they are not trained to design roads in a better manner. So one of the things which we have taken up now is to ensure through our partner institute, State Institute of Urban Development, to train the JEs so that they are able to understand how to design proper infrastructure, proper roads. So I think we need to make programs to reach the cutting edge level, and that I think is one of the most important one. Otherwise, we may be training at the top level, but we would not be able to actually translate what we want into action because the people who are going to act may not have any idea about that.
Thanks. Good. I'll come back to both of you with another question that I have in my mind, but let's just go around a bit. Let me turn to Atul. Atul, heading UNEP and seeing what it means for the environment, what the urban sector means for the environment. How do you see this? What is UNEP's sort of ideas? What thoughts does UNEP have on this? Any thoughts from you on the urban sector capacity?
No, I was looking at there's some good discussions which happened this morning also, and I think Kunal placed the whole problem metrics very well in terms of how important cities are. I was trying to look at it from a little bit of a macro level, from an environmental perspective. In India now, at a global level, the narrative is that it's just not climate change that is a big crisis. It's also the crisis of biodiversity and the crisis of pollution, air and waste. And I think all these three planetary crises come together or converge at a city level. And I think that approach needs to be taken by the city administrators, that while these three planetary crises find their magnitude at a city level, addressing one of them, the interconnectedness will help in addressing the other two also. So if we are looking at, for example, building urban forests, we are also trying to address climate change and pollution to a large extent. And I think that understanding, as Manjula is rightly saying, needs to percolate really down to the lowest levels at the city level. I'll give this as an example. Recently, on the request of the UP government, we organized a 3-day training program for the air pollution staff of the Pollution Control Board positioned at the city level in Agra. Of course, the pollution control boards of other states also joined, and all the 19 cities which are considered as the most polluted in UP also joined that 3-day training program. And it was amazing to see that the people who were actually addressing air pollution issues at the city level actually did not understand how air pollution was happening in their cities, what was the apportionment being done for the cities, how it has to be tackled. They were basically collecting data as they were the monitoring centers of air pollution. Beyond that, what needs to be done was something that they were not understanding. And I think had they understood the scene of how air pollution issue can be addressed, they would then need to interconnect with the other city departments which would be affecting climate change or biodiversity. So I think I agree with Manjula, that kind of understanding of environmental mitigation, which is there at a global level or a national level, needs to be understood at the city level. And I think the capacity building programs that are being organized with LCCM is going to be a huge initiative in this regard. It's something that needs to take into account that as we're talking of climate change, we need to bring the other elements also in.
Thanks, Atul. I think it's very, very interesting you say this, your experience with the program that you did in UP. And while we talk at one level and at a certain level of understanding, what's really happening or the understanding at the level where the action really has to happen, there is a very different problem. And that's really what we are bringing out. I think that's very powerful. Let me turn to Anshu. Anshu, I don't think this program would have gone anywhere if it wasn't for the enthusiasm and the encouragement that you gave at this very early stage. I must say that I say there are two people who are responsible for helping get this to this stage. Anshu from Shakti and Kunal Kumar of the ministry. I think these two really were the first champions. And they are the most important because once something gets moving, many others do join the bandwagon. But when a product is just not known and someone comes forward, I think that champion is the most important. So really thanks to you for having done this. But again, you've been in the IAS, you've seen cities, from your field level postings. What is your perspective on the kind of capacity building needs in the cities? Are we doing things right the way we are? Are there any changes that we need to make? What is your thinking on this?
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much for the kind words. The conceptualization and vision was yours. We're happy to support and really happy to be involved with initiative. So my take is the following, that, and I pick up on some points which were discussed in the first half, when people talked about India's pledges and COP, in particular net zero by 2070. I don't think we have really understood what we have placed in COP, the implications of net zero by 2070. And in particular, the fact that there is a fundamental transformation of our economy, our infrastructure, everything. That has not really sunk into us, and naturally because what India has committed is something which no other country has attempted in the past. Most countries followed a model where the emissions peak, now they are trying to decarbonize. Whereas what we are saying is our most modeling studies say India's emissions will peak at around 4 or 5 tons and then get to net zero. So it's not just about climate mitigation alone, it's a fundamentally different economic paradigm. Now that links to everything, cities, how we produce goods and services, how we make food, everything. Coming to cities, sir, it's been mentioned that cities will be the most important demand center in the country. Now, in terms of energy services, it will be the highest demand center. What is not clear is whether the solutions to that lie within cities' jurisdiction. For example, most power comes from outside. Most goods and services do come from outside. So if you want to make cities quote-unquote carbon neutral, we need to figure out what solutions are within cities' jurisdiction and what lie outside. So in that sense, what we have initiated is something very important to help build capacity in the various decision makers in urban local bodies, city administrations, and also the political executives. It's important to get them involved in this initiative because at the end of the day, they will be championing. So that's what I would say, sir. And other parts of cities will be facing the impacts of climate change as well. We saw in Delhi what happened last 1 month because of heat waves. The severe heat wave which struck us last 1 month with temperature went to 49 degrees Celsius is only a sign of things to come. And therefore, mitigation and resilience, how we can go hand in hand, will become very crucial for our decision.
Thanks very much, Anshu. I think that is really good. Resilience and mitigation have to go hand in hand. I've always believed that we've always had problems raising funds for resilience. It's easier to raise money for mitigation because whatever you do on mitigation gives you global benefits, so people are willing to pay for that. Resilience is an improvement in your own backyard. So often you have to raise money for that locally. That's one of the challenges we've seen between mitigation and resilience, but I think a program like this, if resilience also finds strong space, I think that's going to be very useful. Let me turn to Rajit. Rajit, you call yourself an urban designer. You're an architect, but you call yourself an urban designer. You're trained in that. You worked as a consultant earlier. You're now working with WRI. You work closely with many cities. What is your understanding of the kind of capacity gaps? And what is it that we need to focus on? Not just on climate, but overall on city planning. Both Anshu and Atul spoke about actions that need to happen outside of silos. Things that should not happen in silos. A bit of a larger thinking, a more comprehensive nature of the thinking. And so what is your view? Where is the kind of gaps that you see in that?
Thank you, Vikram, and many congratulations to all the partners here for this new initiative that's been launched. In terms of our work, when we work with cities over the past 15-20 years for me, we see two sides of the problem. One is the institutional side of the problem, where public institutions, as mentioned by other panelists, there is a capacity and a capability gap. The capacity, of course, being in the number of, like for example, the ratio of planners to people is one of the lowest in India as compared to, say, Canada. So we don't have enough people to solve public problems in the first place. Then when it comes to actual people within the system, what is their ability to have the broadest conception of problems like climate change and then to figure out solutions for that? It is not in their daily, work profile to do research and development. They have to run the city, they're managing the city. So they don't have the bandwidth to look at research, understand all those complex numbers, the models. It's just numbers, put out for them. So I think, and this is very trainable. It's just that it's not in their daily, work profile. So that's one part of the problem, which is the institutional part. The other is the gap between institutions and players out there. There are excellent solutions being provided by social entrepreneurs, by industry, by academia, by civil society. There are a number of providers even for training and skill building. But the gap between the government reaching out to these other institutions and entities is very large. You can easily use their spare capacity to improve your training programs. So I think to summarize, why we have these two gaps. On the one hand, government should be building its capacity to be able to deliver on complex challenges such as climate change. But at the same time, they don't have to wait till their full capacity is built. Through partnerships, like the one we are seeing today, that is the best way forward to solve our capacity gaps.
Thanks, Rajesh. That's very interesting. Again, you are echoing in many ways points that Anshu and Atul also mentioned. The big gap between what we talk here, what's really there in the city. And then, as you mentioned, we are so caught up with their day-to-day stuff that really an ability to think beyond what do I have to do in the next 1 hour, they don't have the bandwidth for that kind of thing. But moving to Hitesh now. Hitesh, you are really at the fulcrum of all this. You know, everything that you're talking about ultimately lands on your very capable shoulder of building the kind of capacities that are needed. But first part of my question really to you is, again, what are you noticing as the capacity gaps? You know, same thing that I tried to get across, but same thing to you.
Thank you, sir. And, again, congratulations for this program. I think this vision getting 55 into. But it was your vision, and we are just taking it forward. So, congratulations for that. You know, on the capacity gap which you have asked me, I just think is that we talk about climate at a policy level or at a global level. The language which we talk and the grammar which we use is different grammar when we go to a city level. So I think the biggest level, our grammar has to be same. If we really want to talk about capacity issues at the city level, because our language and their language do not match. You know, they talk about sectoral, for them climate does not make sense. So how does the sectoral issues lead to a climate is the gap which we have to build. So that's one area where I particularly think we need to really bridge that gap. And second thing which, as we talk about, we are only talking about individual capacity. But individual capacity will not alone do anything unless we start talking about institutional capacity. And the question is the jurisdiction, the way. So I particularly think it is more of a governance of climate, which is much more important than only just taking a climate in a site. So who actually governs at city level? And it leads to a bigger issue, which may not be at this right at this moment of time to discuss. But I think while we talk about climate issues or any other capacity issues, we always tend to talk about very, very narrow sense. So I think we need to really go back to the drawing board and say, are our cities equipped enough? Are they prepared enough to take these gaps? So, and if that is the question we want to ask, then we need to really start looking. And I tend to, even though it may not be politically correct to say, but I think it's 25, 30 years of 74th Amendment. If it has not worked, that's a right time to throw it out of into the dustbin and start thinking, because new issues have emerged. When I was a student, there was no air pollution discussion, there was no climate discussion, there was no other. This is the new areas emerging, and with this exponential growing urban world, we need to really start evolving our capacity building tools and techniques rather than stuck to one side of the story. That's what I think.
Interesting. I think you put me on a different track now. Let me move to this. The whole thing of what existed as a problem earlier, you have very different kind of problems coming up. And the question I often ask is, the kind of planners or the kind of people coming out of the educational system, how well equipped are they in understanding the newer kind of problems that are coming up, right? So it's something that we need to look at even our academic curriculum, see if that really matches up to today's need. So going back again to Sanjeev and Manjula, what do you think is the opportunity for the state training institutes to tie up with academia? Do you see some kind of a complementarity in what they do? Do you think that would help solve the problem? Sanjeev first and then.
Yeah, I think the kind of placement that the state institutes, the administrative training institutes have, I think they are the best suited to carry out this program forward, because all state officials and even the government of India, the IAS, they somehow one point or the other they go through the state APIs. All PCS officers, like if I talk about Punjab, all IAS officers, and even all the departments, let's say around 50 odd departments that we have, one point or the other they have to go through. Secondly, The state ATIs have the kind of infrastructure that is required to roll out good courses at such good level. Infrastructure in terms of, the halls, others, and then also the persons who can develop the content, the resource persons, they are available. And like we were talking about the various kinds in terms of, the academicians, they are involved with the state ATI. The officers who are serving and officers who have retired, they are also involved in terms of advisors, senior advisors, consultants, those people who have actually got, a lot of exposure in the field. Plus the kind of tie-ups that the state ATIs, like for if I can talk specifically about our ATI, we have tied up with the Central Institute of Governance in terms of which is at Singapore for leadership programs. We have also tied up with the Korean Institute for the programs that we roll out for the PCS and IAS officers. And our ATI was one of the ATI which took, the full program for the IAS officers after Laksana, Lal Bahadur Shastri Academy. So it's one of the institute on our own. So we have, certain, they come to us for roughly 4 weeks or so. But full program that we did for nearly 65 trainees from all over the country, from 18 states they attended. So I think overall, in all, the capacities are there, but somehow the kind of work that we should be doing, frankly, honestly, we are not doing that kind of work in terms of, both like somebody talked about research part, maybe because of lack of resources and others. But yes, the Government of India flagship programs like AMRUT, Smart City, then Swachh Bharat Mission, even we are into NJJM, KRC, or also National Jal Jeevan Mission also. Plus this latest, we were the ones who rolled out Climate Center for Cities, CCube also.
So let me move to Manjula. I mean, basically what I'm trying to ask is, do you see a complementarity between academia and the state training institutes? Is there a role that both of them could play together? Is there some kind of complementarity?
So, as administrative training institutes, we don't have capacity or expertise in everything. So generally for every training program, we tend to involve resource persons from the academia. So there is always this collaboration because we need to get the experts to come and speak. But and we also get the practitioners. And so we need to ensure that the issue of grammar and language, that's from the Ritesh mentioned. See, sometimes academia comes and they talk at a very high level. So that may not be understood by the people there. And they may have their own difficulties because they will think, okay, it is good in theory, but may not be good in practice. So we tend to get both academia and the practitioners because people also need to know somebody has done that, they have tried that and done that. So people learn from examples more rather than just like theory. So in this context, I think building toolkits, building checklists, building case studies and showing them would be a very good way of ensuring that they learn from the experience of others. And that is something which we are trying to do in terms of getting best practices from elsewhere and making case studies out of it. And I just wanted to mention one thing about checklists. We all keep talking about, okay, because this is what they need to do. But how do they do that? So a simple thing about, giving a checklist which they will check before something happens. Like when we were in the field, before every rainy season, engineers were supposed to go, check the tanks, and then fill a checklist to see whether the bunds are strong or not, whether the wasteways are okay, so that when there is a heavy rainfall, this breach doesn't happen, etc. These are best practices, but these get kind of forgotten over a period of time. So important also to give them toolkits, a checklist which they can use. Thank you.
So effectively what we are saying is while there is a need for sort of linkage between academia and the training institutes, there is also a need to be able to convert that academic conversation into something that will be understood at the ground level, make it more practical. Great. So again, now coming to Atul, again pulling you back to LCCL. Frankly, you were one of the first who agreed to come on as a core partner for the LCCL program. What is your vision about this program? What would you like this program to do? How would you like to see it getting further and possible going out, through the UNEP channels going beyond India? What is your thinking on that? Any ideas on
Well, today I think most of the discussion has been around cities and urban areas and the importance of the cities, and we're trying to frame the whole LCCM from that perspective. I would like to add one element that this kind of program, you need to bring in the other 50% that is there in India, the rural economy, the rural areas. We should not forget that carbon emissions from agriculture or from rural areas is also almost as much as from, or if not as much, a little less than from the cities. So I think that's an important element that UNEP would certainly like to assist with in terms of developing this. Of course, I think right now, as a phase one, the focus should be on the cities because that's also a low-hanging fruit, which we should be looking at in terms of taking this forward. The second element I was thinking in terms of how this whole program can benefit from UNEP would largely be the robustness and the dynamic nature of any capacity building effort. Meaning you cannot build a curriculum which will last you 10 years or 15 years. It may not even last you 6 months because of the dynamic nature of the environmental shifting that is taking place. And I think that's where UNEP could be helpful in trying to bring in the latest science which is there at the global level on climate, on biodiversity, on pollution, to feed into the curriculum or the kind of courses that are going to be developed. I think leaders who are looking at 5,000 need to be aware of the dynamic changes that are taking place. In fact, if you're looking at climate change, it takes the COP that takes place once a year, apart from the subsidiary body meetings, the whole international narrative is changing weekly in terms of the knowledge that you have to bring to your practitioners or people who are acting at the local level. So I think that science is something that we can bring. The second, of course, is there is a lot happening on capacity building at global level in various countries. And those methodologies, those approaches are something that can be brought to the doorsteps of LCCM in terms of trying to see how you look at innovative approaches of capacity building. Thirdly, certainly technical experts from UNEP, from our networks globally can be brought in. We were talking of projects in the morning, 6 to 8 months. In fact, that could be a very useful area where, in fact, why UNEP, all the UN agencies and philanthropies or other institutions working in India, the kind of network of programs and projects they have in India could be a good ground for these climate practitioners to be associated with and do their 6 to 8 months kind of project work. Finally, I think one very important element that you should be looking at is this whole Karma Yogi program of the Government of India, where LCCM should get linked to the IGOT. That would be a very useful connection for not only these 5,000 practitioners you are aiming at, but also the vast multitude of civil services that are there who could benefit from the kind of effort that is going in developing the post-mortem. Why just limit it to 5,000 people? All the civil services and Chadha Sahib and Mandla were talking about. I think they can also benefit from whatever course material is coming forward. And finally, I think Hitesh has hit the nail on the head on the language. That's where I think LCCM needs to be very careful. Both Anshu and you are aware of our very first meeting with the Bihar secretaries on the low carbon pathway strategy that we are all making together. And the language we were all speaking was something that interrupted the meeting drastically because the secretary sitting across listening to us could not understand the scientific nature of the presentations they were making. So we need to make the language very simple. And when we are talking of, as Manjula is talking of junior engineers or people, air pollution experts sitting in a pollution control board in a city, you cannot expect them to be talking of the international language or understanding the international language that comes from the UN. So I think that's a big responsibility all of us have, that the UN verbose language needs to be made very, very understandable to the actual 5,000 leaders and others you're looking at.
Thanks, Abdul. I think a number of very interesting points. So, well, you're absolutely right. It needs to go beyond urban. We are only starting with the urban sector, and as you recognize that, it's good to start from there. But definitely the plan is to go beyond. And the 5,000 is only a start. You know, the questions that have often been coming up, people have confused. These are 5,000 people who are getting into some kind of a deeper capacity building program. What we need is probably 5 million or 50 million who need to be made aware of what these issues are. So right now we're looking at just this 5,000 who have a deeper knowledge and maybe become the nucleus around whom others get built up. So that's really the idea of the 5,000. Your idea, your point about the language and the example that you gave in Bihar, I think that is something that all of us have experienced. The language we speak here, the language that is spoken even in the state secretariat. You know, forget about the ground level. It's a world of difference. And one other, point that you brought up, which I found very interesting. You see, there are capacity building programs and capacity building programs and capacity building programs. If you do 1 day, 2 day, 3 day kind of capacity building programs, there's so many of them going on. And what we've heard from many is that people at the ground are often fed up with so many programs, which one do I go for? So is there a way in which all these can be embedded into some kind of a compulsory program that everyone goes through? Make it a part of that. So that's something that everyone thinks. Sometimes, one-off capacity building programs don't get the kind of participation you're really hoping to achieve. And that was one of the reasons why we thought that let this be a longer involvement than just be a 2 or 3 day kind of a thing. So that's some of my thoughts on the points that you very rightly brought up. But moving to Anshu, again, getting on to the same question really that I asked Atul, what do you think should be the direction of this capacity building? What should be the institutional arrangements? What is your thinking on this? From your own experience, how do we spread this much more effectively?
Thank you, sir. Quick thought. Most of them are having very nicely already mentioned that, sir. So we pick up some of those threads. I echo the fact that 5,000 is just a starting point, and it needs to be much bigger at a much bigger scale. Just because climate is a central problem to everything. I also pick up your point on capacity building programs. So why there are so many programs which run in various sectors. So what makes this special? I would submit, sir, that climate is central to everything. The way we see it, climate is central to health. Climate is central to water. Climate is central to agriculture. So you cannot have a capacity building program in one sector without dealing with the climate hazard. And thus, it makes this particular thing special. Because as I said earlier, it's not just climate. You cannot talk about climate mitigation or resilience. In Indian case, it's a new paradigm altogether, how we move from here onwards in the next 30, 40 years. So, bringing climate to the center of discussion, whether it is in a local body or a Gram Panchayat or a Jila Panchayat, I think that is very important. Which I think this program hopefully will do. I also agree with Atul sir that gradually let's move beyond cities to also rural areas. Can we target Gram Panchayat, Jila Panchayat and bring climate into that discourse? And finally, I echo the science to policy connect. So we have brilliant scientists who understand climate science, who understand the various nuances of climate science and its impact on various sectors. But how do we connect with the decision maker in a manner which the decision maker understands policy relevant information? So that I think will be a great contribution.
Thanks so much. I think, right now the way we focus at CCM is the person on the ground. The person who's not only given a basic understanding of climate, a very basic understanding of climate, but a lot more focus on how do you bring climate thinking into the work that you are doing. If you are a public transport operator, how do you bring climate thinking into what you do? If you are a sort of a waste management kind of a person, how do you bring climate thinking into what you do? So that's what we've tried to do in the LCCM today, is simplify some of the basic understanding of climate, but convert it into how does this impact your work? So that's what we've been trying to do. But let me now come to Rajit. Rajit, what I would like to understand from you, or your thoughts on, we're not talking of state training institutes, we've talked about academia, but at a larger level, if this kind of capacity building, I'm not saying only on climate or only LCCM, but the larger gamut of building capacity for improved urban planning and management, what should be the kind of an institutional architecture that the country should have? You have an IUA, you have state training institutions, but what do you see as a larger institutional architecture that will help sort of take up the program at a very ambitious level?
Right. Thank you, sir. One would be, of course, we have to move towards a training market. We don't have a robust market. It will be very difficult to change the status quo that we're in right now. And one way to do that would be to actually move towards a network platform. This could be publicly backed, government backed. I take the analogy of the sharing economy because that would be a useful way to put it. Today we have Uber, Amazon, Skype. They're all shared economies because they're using our phones, our cameras, our internet connections, and providing excellent service. The outcome is very good, but they've used somebody else's resources. However, they manage the rules of the game. They ensure that who can collaborate on their platform, what are the rules of engagement, what is the quality control, there are feedback loops installed. So in that way, there's a good management of the system, and then they back out. Then it is between the person who is providing that service and the customer. So they actually set it up and then they moved out. I think government should take a similar role in a network platform mode, where they assess the demand and supply gaps. They assess the gap between the skill of people and what the industry requires. So ensuring quality trainings, bringing on board institutions that can deliver these various trainings, and then pull out, because only government cannot solve the problem. Of course, they are the primary sort of people we would look forward to manage such a platform. But they should take on different players to bring in this kind of network platform of training. That robust market, when done well, can only improve over time. And the linkages between industry, academia, institutions, government, and society itself will then become very strengthened. Then we'll have a good training market in place.
So really creating that institutional architecture really as a network, not single institution here and there, but a kind of a platform where many can feed into and many can pick up from. Now, when Rajit kept talking about government should do this, I think what she meant was NIUA. So, government is to office of work. NIUA really has to be the actor. So the question to you is then, what do you think of a network like this? You have so many programs with so many different partners. Your Climate Smart CQ itself has 60 different partners. What do you think of the thought that Rajit has given in terms of creating that network? Do you think that's useful? How do you think you can go about doing it? NIUA really has to be the focal point of that.
No, I fully agree with what Rajit has said, and that is what we have started. We call ourselves as an aggregator. So the role of an IU is more of an aggregator and really help the urban ecosystem. So that is what the journey we have. On the capacity building side, Atulji talked about IGOT. We have started NULP, National Urban Learning Platform. This is actually for urban practitioners. Definitely some of them will be linked with IGOT. We are using almost a similar platforms, and idea is slowly once we well,
one for urban preference, but for the other practitioners, we can start linking that with the DOPT model. So we have already started working on that model. But I think as an aggregator that we are looking at it and what platform approach, it is not only the capacity thing, but I think what Manjula ma'am talked about, what type of tools which are available with the city. So if we can make those tools available, whether it's a checklist form, whether it's an assessment form, and if city has to where it falls in that assessment, how we can really start looking at it. Second thing is we think as an aggregator, because all of us working on a climate issue with all the 60 partners, everybody has its own agenda, its own way of doing it. How as an NIU bring those together and create one model RFP or a model template or a model thing. So that gives an idea that they can use more than that, but this is a minimum viable product which is required. And that if we can get that MVP right, I think that's the one contribution as an aggregator we need to provide. Third thing is, we all talk about different levels. So can we have one standard? This is a minimum viable product. This is standards we want to make. As a think tank or a anchor of this thing, we need to come up with those standards. Fourth, training and capacity building because of NULP and others is the one component of it. But it's the overall in a larger component we have to start doing it. Transfer of knowledge. So I have called it within NIU last 1.5 years, we have called it 5T approach to become an aggregator. And the 5T is tools, templates, technologies, training, and transfer of knowledge. So that's how we are looking at the role of urban over, I can call it, for NIU to become. And I think that's the only way we can reach the scale. Otherwise, we will be doing our siloed approaches. And if we have to reach a scale which is much higher than what we are even imagining, I think we need to adopt this network and platform approach and has to link with the capacity grid, create a capacity grid within the country. That this platform should really help the states and cities to really take it forward.
Fascinating. I think to me this has been a fascinating discussion on a topic that is very close to my heart. So with this, just one little thought I would leave behind as a kind of a summation of all this. We're really looking at institutions, we're looking at individuals, we're looking at, let's say, pedagogy. That's an important thing. Content is generally available in plenty. It's shifting the content, bringing it together into a form that gets transferred well. I think these are some of the key messages that I'm picking up. NIUA has so many partners. I think the point about being an aggregator is, to my mind, a great idea. How do you play that aggregator's role? I think that's going to be a very important thing. But with that, let me thank all the panelists. Thank you so much for the fascinating discussion. Thanks to Manjula, whom I brought in from the audience, but thank you for your contribution. And thanks to everyone who's here. Thanks for staying on.